This is an all-day live alert.
Well, hi there, everyone. I'm Tim Blotz. We are waiting for a press conference to begin at the state capitol now, where lawmakers will introduce a new boundary waters protection bill. Now, this is all happening ahead of the legislative session that begins on Monday. So you got a lot of bill introductions that are come this week and news conferences that go along with it. This particular bill would ban 4 high-risk practices of sulfide or copper mining in the watershed of the boundary waters. Now, scientific data shows that these particular mining practices can be harmful to the boundary waters canoe area. We're going to hear now from the bill's authors and members of the Save the Boundary Waters campaign. So let's listen in.
Of the campaign to save the boundary waters and Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness. Save the Boundary Waters is a coalition of over 400 organizations and businesses nationwide that are advocating for the permanent protection of the boundary waters canoe area wilderness. The Boundary Waters is America's most visited wilderness, with up to 180,000 folks coming from around the country annually to enjoy the clean water, dark skies, and vibrant wilderness edge communities like Ely and Grand Marais. Proposed copper mining immediately upstream of the Boundary Waters threatens this special place and its watershed, which also includes Voyageurs National Park, Quetico Provincial Park, and the Superior National Forest. We are here today to discuss legislation that will be introduced later today that will advance critical protections for the boundary waters and its surrounding ecosystem. This legislation, which will be introduced by Senator Kelly Morrison and Representative Sandra Feist, who are with us here today, safeguards the watershed by prohibiting 4 of the most dangerous features associated with copper mining and addresses concerns raised by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources in 2023 in its findings of fact, conclusions of law and order as part of ongoing state-level litigation. This litigation, brought by our organization in June of 2020, focuses on Minnesota's state rules on where a hard rock mine can be sited. A hard rock mine meaning a copper mine, not an iron or a taconite mine. We argue that these rules are insufficient to protect the boundary waters because they allow for toxic copper mining to take place in the headwaters of the wilderness. In the DNR's findings of fact, the agency specifically recommends that the state legislature assess state policy relative to 4 mining practices and their compatibility with the protection of the boundary waters. This legislation heeds that call and is an important stepping stone towards permanent protection for the boundary waters. Here with me today are bill authors Representative Sandra Feist and Senator Kelly Morrison, who will share more on the new legislation. We are extremely grateful to these stalwart champions of the boundary waters for introducing this new bill that will get us one step closer to permanent protection for the wilderness. And now I will hand it off to Representative Feist.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here today to help shape and protect the future of the Boundary Waters canoe area wilderness. The Boundary Waters is the most visited wilderness in the country and a crown jewel of our state. And it is under the immediate threat of sulfide or copper mining in the Rainy River headwaters watershed. I cherish the adventures that I and my family have had in the Boundary Waters, and I want future generations of Minnesotans to have those same opportunities to explore this pristine region. The Minnesota Department of Natural Resources identified in 2023 4 features of sulfide or copper mining that pose the greatest danger to the boundary waters. The experts at the DNR have made it clear that existing law provides inadequate protections, and we are here to answer their call by prohibiting these practices within the Rainy River headwaters watershed. The Boundary Waters canoe area wilderness is the beating heart of our state, a source of clean water, a haven for wildlife, and a legacy that we have a duty to protect for future generations. This common sense legislation would place into statute critical restrictions around sulfide or copper mining practices that we know for a fact would pollute this ecological and recreational gem. I really love this bill. It's rooted in silence, or not silence. Let's try that again. I really love this bill because it is rooted in science. It's proactive, and it prioritizes long-term preservation of our state's greatest asset over short-term profit. Thank you so much. And with that, I would like to invite Senator Kelly Morrison.
Thank you, Representative Feist, and good afternoon. Thanks for being here.
I'm Kelly Morrison. I represent District 45 in the Minnesota Senate. I am a very proud Minnesotan and a lifelong lover of the Boundary Waters. When I'm not a legislator, I'm an obstetrician gynecologist, so protecting public health and using evidence-based policy is a guiding principle of mine. Like many Minnesotans, I have a personal connection to the Boundary Waters. My husband John and I have taken our kids at least once a year since they were little. It's a cherished family tradition that has created lifelong memories for all of us. And we're not alone. As you've heard, the Boundary Waters Wilderness Area is the most visited wilderness in the United States. It's recognized the world over for its pristine waters, unique ecosystems, and stunning beauty. Having sacred, protected spaces in our world is an increasingly rare and precious commodity, which is why so many people want to protect this watery wilderness. Polling shows that almost 70% of Minnesotans want permanent protection for the BWCA. So as we consider the question of whether or not Minnesota is going to embark on the risk of allowing sulfide or copper mining in our water-rich state, I think we have to approach it with eyes wide open. Our laws were written for iron and taconite mining, which is a distinctly different kind of mining from the proposed sulfide or copper mining, which entities like the Chilean company Antofagasta propose to do in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. What are the true risks of this kind of mining, which has, by the way, never been done in Minnesota before? And are we willing to take those risks on the doorstep of our beloved Boundary Waters? Our own DNR, perhaps recognizing that our laws are inadequate, recommended that the legislature assess state policy relative to the 4 mining practices that are involved with sulfide or copper mining and their compatibility with the protection of the Boundary Waters. Those practices are waste tailings, reactive waste rock, heap leaching, and smelting. There is strong scientific evidence that if these high-risk activities were developed in the Rainy River headwaters watershed, they would do severe and irreparable harm to the BWCA. I think it's also important to remember that the Clean Water Act and federal and state regulations prohibit any water quality degradation in the Boundary Waters, which has some of the cleanest water in the world. It would be impossible to maintain that standard if these 4 practices are allowed to be developed upstream. The bill that Representative Feist and I are introducing would prohibit those 4 dangerous mining practices in the Rainy River headwaters watershed. Passing this legislation into law is a stepping stone to protecting the BWCA permanently so that Minnesota's crown jewel will be protected for generations to come. Thank you, and I think with that, we'll take any questions.
What's the interplay with this and do you still, like if the state level bill passes, do you still need Representative McCollum's bill at the federal? Can you just talk a little bit about, like, are both layers needed? Does one do the trick?
Both layers are needed because there are federal and state lands that apply, so we need both federal and state protections.
And I can't find the bill yet in pre-file. Are there other sponsors in addition to you two?
In the House, there are, and I'm going to, I guess I can't say you can't quote me because it's a press conference, but off the top of my head, my recollection, if I can picture the bill jackets, are that Representative Cedric Frazier signed on, Representative Samantha Vang signed on, Representative Lee Klinke signed on, and I believe there were others. I know that Representative Sydney Jordan is planning to sign on, and that she and I talked about it, and then I forgot to get her signature, but she is supportive, and I believe there are several others, and that is just by memory.
Okay.
And as you know, that, oh, sorry. No.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think that the
Could you speak by the mic, please?
Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. I believe that in the House, anyway, we did a bunch of pre-session introductions, and my recollection is that sometime today those will become public, so it might be online imminently.
Okay.
Might not be yet. I looked today already, too. Yeah.
And I wanted to be sure that it was introduced, so I introduced it, and I'm having conversation. And as you know, you can only have 5 authors in the Senate.
And they can
right.
Yeah.
And these will start where, do you know? What committee? You know?
I believe in the environment. In the Senate, it would be Environment, Climate, and Legacy.
And we'll be starting with Chair Hansen's committee in the House.
Okay. And that other stops, do you think? You guys always have multiple stops. And just one?
I think just one.
Yeah. A similar version of this bill had been introduced in previous sessions, just not last year, right? there was a state legislation before, there wasn't a state level bill. I thought I recalled.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So we did introduce the state, oh, I'm so sorry, I need to make sure the microphones are helpful. We did introduce the corollary to Representative McCollum's bill, the state level Boundary Waters Permanent Protection Bill last session. But this bill would not prohibit mining, it would just prohibit these 4 particularly risky mining practices.
Okay, so kind of.
Yeah.
But would it be, could you do this mining for this materials without using these 4? If these 4 results are banned, does that in effect prohibit this type of mining?
Barring a new technology, yes, it would bar that kind of mining. I think it's fair to say.
Do you think the narrowing to these technologies, is that like improve your whip count essentially? Does it make more likely, especially in the Senate, that you think you can get all 34 votes needed?
I hope so. I mean, I really appreciate the specificity of this bill, and given that DNR suggested that these were needed, implied that they were needed, I think it does improve our chances.
Could you paint a picture of what these pollutants would do to the watershed for us again?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a number of different concerns with sulfide ore copper mining. The one that is most sort of apparent and there's the most literature on is the impact of acid mine drainage, which is essentially that in order to get the minerals out of this particular ore body, the rock has to be brought to the surface, and once it is exposed to air and water, it leaches heavy acid, so something that's akin to battery acid, and it leaches out trace amounts of other very damning metals and minerals such as mercury and lead, and basically it runs into the water, both the groundwater if the rock is stored on land, but also into the interconnected waterways that we're also familiar with in the Boundary Waters and Quetico Superior ecosystem writ large. And so this is a really, really toxic substance. It would be extremely difficult to be mitigated, and so that's one primary concern specific to sulfide ore copper mining. We're also concerned about these things because, as Senator Morrison talked about, the public health impacts of having things like mercury and lead in the waters that folks recreate in, swim in, drink water from, harvest wild rice from, fish. This is 1854 Treaty Authority land and areas, so the tribes retain the right to hunt and fish in these areas and gather, and so those resources would also be significantly impacted. So that's the primary sort of pollution concern that we have specific to sulfide ore copper mining.
What's the state of the Boundary Waters right now in terms of water clarity and ecosystem?
I mean, the Boundary Waters is an extremely, extremely pristine water body and ecosystem writ large. It is some of the cleanest water in North America. It's amazing that we have an almost 4.4 million acre continuous landscape. If you put together Canada's Quetico Provincial Park, Superior National Forest, Voyageurs, Boundary Waters, a resource like that doesn't really exist anywhere else, and it's in really, really immaculate standing as a water body. So we're working off of having a very pristine, a place where you can literally drink the water out of the lakes, in contrast to the impacts of sulfide ore copper mining, which we've seen time and time again are absolutely devastating to local communities, to environments. 100% of copper mines have polluted in their lifetime. So we don't think that this industry is compatible with what we have, which is a very, very unique freshwater ecosystem.
The bill, do you know where the governor stands with the bill?
Sorry?
I have not spoken with the governor yet about the bill, but I look forward to that conversation.
Same.
What kind of obstacles are you going to be facing? Tough question.
Yeah.
So obviously this is a challenging policy area, and we really appreciate about this bill the specificity that it is science-based, that it is, it's not a full ban, that, we're not anti-sulfide or copper. We just want to ensure that if we're going to extract it, that we do it in a safe way. And so I feel like the conversation around this bill is going to be different than conversations where we talk about, an all-out prohibition on sulfide or copper mining.
And I would just add that I think that it's a conversation that's overdue in our state. We need to have a fulsome conversation about the risks of sulfide or copper mining, and specifically in this case, in the watershed of our boundary waters. This would drain directly into the BWCA and change it forever. And once it's gone, we can't get it back.
And how would that impact the economy up there?
Well, it would impact it significantly. There's a robust outdoor recreation industry that's almost $1 billion, I believe, 17,000 jobs. It would be devastating.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Otherwise, we do have bill fact sheets available, and if you haven't connected with Libby yet, please do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do think that the host should be published imminently.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Refreshing that.
Oh, you do too? Yeah. This morning I went and I was like, oh my God.